Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Kerry Pollock, Cara Henderson and Alison McConnell are here with me. Cup weekend fixtures to look back to as we now know who will make up the last eight. Just a reminder of the teams advancing: Glasgow City, Motherwell, St Johnstone, Spartans, Hearts, Hibernian, Aberdeen and Rangers. We will of course discuss Celtic being out, but Alison, a big hitter out this early. Other teams will be weighing up their chances thinking we could really have a good go at this here.
Yeah, I think it leaves Glasgow City and Rangers as the two favourites. Rangers obviously the holders of it. I think other teams might fancy having a go. Interesting to see what the draw is when it takes place later on tonight. But yeah, I think someone giving way between Glasgow and City and Celtic was always going to open the door then to a fairly intriguing run-in. But I think Celtic will be gutted. I think that's them out of both domestic cups now. So 2 cup dismissals within a fortnight to 2 of their biggest rivals. I do wonder what the psychology will be behind that. It means now that they have full focus on the league, as Elena Sadiku said, but I think they have 2 huge problems if they want to retain their title. I think the first one is they're not clinical enough in front of goal, and they are defensively porous at the back.
Well, that's what Elena Sadiku said, Cara. Loads of chances created, second half not good enough, too many repetitive errors. As a player, is it just frustration on the pitch when it just won't click together for you and these things keep happening week after week?
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously we've had it a wee bit this season in terms of when the goals aren't going in, you just leave yourself constantly exposed. You're never comfortable in a game, which is a tough place to be, because for all your dominance, and Celtic obviously dominate a lot of games, if you're not getting the goal, if you're not getting the cushion. Obviously with us actually earlier on, a couple of weeks ago, they went into half-time 1-0, they dominated the full first half really, and then we got the goal to go 1 each, and we probably could have gone 2-1 with the chance as well. And so it's just leaving that back door open when, for all their dominance, for all their shots, you know, they would probably much rather the game was put to bed. And yeah, from a player's point of view, that's a really frustrating aspect.
Is this a worrying time for Celtic fans, Alison, with the league being their only chance at glory this season, or do they have to look at it as a positive? You know, that's their only focus, there's no other distractions.
I think that will certainly be the spin that Elena tries to put on it. However, I think they'll be devastated. I think Celtic's remit is about winning trophies, about being successful. I think going out of the Scottish Cup at the quarter-final stage would not have been in the plan. They would have fancied themselves as going all the way. Same for the League Cup, going out to Rangers, not beating Rangers in their last 5 attempts. So big question marks there. I think there'll definitely be questions asked about not having sustained runs in both cup competitions. And in terms of the league, they've got themselves into a far more healthy position now after the Champions League campaign. They've won the 2 games in hand, as they would have been expected to do. They're now level on points with Glasgow City, substantially behind in terms of the goal difference. But I do wonder about how they're going to fare when they're playing top 3, top 4 opposition. I think they're very comfortable against Hearts midweek last week, struggled at points against Hibs this season. But for me, I do think there are 2 big problem areas to solve, and that is being more clinical in front of goal and definitely being stronger at the back. And I think the cheapness of the goals that Celtic concede has to undermine their defence of the title, I think.
Has there been a mentality problem, would you say, from when they started the drop points? You say they haven't beat Rangers, Glasgow City as well, when they come up against the top half of the table?
I think it's definitely an accusation that may be levelled at them until you're getting results on a consistent basis. I think they won the last game against Glasgow City. I think there was very, very little between the teams in that. I think if you point to yesterday's game and look at the first 45 minutes, Celtic could have killed the game off. They started very well, created a lot of chances. They could have had the game and the tie negotiated by half-time. But when you don't do that, you leave yourself vulnerable, and that's what happened. And I thought they lost their way entirely in the second period. I think they lost their shape. I think it became increasingly ragged. It became increasingly desperate, trying to go and find a goal once they had gone behind. And I think you sense an element of panic when they're behind and chasing a game. The fact they've not beaten Rangers in 5 attempts, I think, does point to question marks about mentality in these games, about Rangers holding the upper hand. And I think that that lies on you. I think it's an accusation that persists until you're able to go and get the monkey off your back.
The goal scoring problem, Cara, seemed to be an issue since Elina Sudoku came into the job and replaced Fran Alonso. She obviously tried to implement her own style of play. Does that beg the question whether Celtic have the players to play the way that she wants to?
I think it's tough because, listen, they're the reigning champions. You know, they managed to get the job done at the end of last season. I think it's hard. I mean, they've got such quality players. I think probably I would say that teams are now more switched on to probably that, instead of thinking, oh, we'll have a go against Celtic, I think that the majority of the time they're facing blocks and low blocks, and they're really having to constantly try and break down probably 11 players behind the football, which is not easy to do. I think obviously they've had some injuries as well. They obviously lost players like Jacinta last year as well, which were creative sparks. But I think it's really hard to sort of. They're out of both cups. Yeah, that was a stinker of a tie for them, probably so early on in the cup. If other teams will be happy, I think it's hard. I think that come the end of the season though, it doesn't. I mean, it's hard because usually it doesn't matter how many goals you score. But we saw last year that was actually really, really important. But I think the main thing now is that they're going to have to play Rangers. I don't know if they've got to play them again before the split, but they've got to play them both twice again. So I think that's the opportunity. I think that's the point that you look at it. But then again, they've also got to face Hearts and Hibs who have proven that they're not easy to play against as well.
Absolutely. League matters. The table is very tight, as you mentioned, Alison. Celtic and Glasgow City both on 47, Rangers and Hibs on 45. Going on squad depth, who is stronger in your eyes?
I would have to say I think Rangers probably have the strongest squad. I think they have the depth to possibly go the distance. I think Glasgow City too, though. I think this season you have seen, you saw over the summer, a concerted effort to overhaul the playing squad, to add to the playing squad. They invested in it on and off the pitch. Obviously then Scott Booth went up to Aberdeen when that job became available, but I think there's been a very aggressive approach from City to say, you know, we're not out of it. I think a lot of observers from the outside last season would have looked at it and saw Celtic and Rangers levelling points, Celtic winning the league on goal difference and City quite a substantial distance off it, and thinking this is now going to be the norm. This will be a pattern that replicates itself from the men's side. Celtic and Rangers have finances to go and they have the support of a wider squad, a wider club to go and kick on. And this now becomes an established pattern. And I think what you have seen from City is, hang on a minute, that's not the case. We've been the dominant force here. We're not going to give that ground up lightly. And I think you have seen that they've really come back this term. I think there'll be a lot of intrigue. I think it points to a title run-in that's as tight and as fraught as what we've seen across recent seasons. I think you can't discount Hibs. I think whether or not they've got the resources to go the distance remains to be seen, but I think they will have an influence in how the title is decided and where it goes. But certainly, if you were to say to me right now, where do I think the title's going, I think my money would probably be on Rangers.
Yeah. Is that always the case? Does the best teams, the strongest teams always prevail in the end?
I think what you're looking at is very little in terms of quality between Rangers, Celtic and Glasgow City. I think there is very, very little between them. I think it's reflected in the games where they come up against one another. It's fairly small margins that determine the victories, but I think Rangers probably have a stronger pool. I think they have the depth to cope across the course of the campaign. However, I do think Glasgow City and Celtic will be there or thereabouts. I think for me it comes down to head-to-heads between them. I think how they fare against one another will probably determine who comes out on top. But if you put a gun to my head, I think for me just now Rangers would probably be favourites.
Just as you mentioned earlier, Cara, they do have to face each other again. Hearts are a little bit further behind, 41 points, but there's still plenty of time to drop points, and as you said, like, they can be dropped anywhere, no games are given.
Yeah, of course. I think that they would all be very silly to underestimate Hearts and Hibs' contributions in terms of the title race, and obviously whoever gets that final top six spot as well. Obviously we've got it the past 2 years. I think we got points off of Rangers at some point last season as well, so the problem is that there's a lot of pressure on that run in. It gets very tight. Last year it was just a case of taking care of business. I think they both did. Obviously, it came down to the goal difference. So I don't know. I think it's really hard to call this season but that's what you want. You want it to be a competitive league. You don't want it to just come down to the top 3 teams. You want it to be, can Hibs and Hearts keep pushing them? Can they take points off it? Can they make it more interesting? It makes it more interesting for the league, I think, as well, than it just being a one-horse race, which it was for so long. So I don't know who I would pick, though. I think that all 3 will have a say, and it's probably Hearts and Hibs as well.
Absolutely. Well, fingers crossed for a tight run-in. It certainly is set up to be an exciting one. On behalf of myself, Cara and Alison, thanks for listening and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.